Before we dive into the panel discussion, a quick introduction. I've spent 22 years in the industry across technology, outsourcing, digital, and artificial intelligence. My present assignment, as Arvind mentioned, is with Legasis. I lead the company. We are a legal tech firm with specialization in compliance, litigation, and contracts management, with presence across 60 countries. Uh, by academics, of course, I take pride that I'm a Simsr graduate, and then I also got an opportunity to do my exec at Stanford. Today's panel is about how do we return back to work. I mean, we spent the last 90 days talking a lot about the lockdown and how it has impacted businesses, the economy, individuals. What's the way forward? We spent a lot of time in conversations talking about how it'll unfold and so on and so forth. But I mean, that's now water under the bridge. We need to be completely focused on how do we move from this point forward. We'll touch upon several points through this conversation, and one of the reasons why we have a diverse panel over here is so that we get their perspectives from the respective industry as well. We'll try and keep this conversation nice and tight for the first 40 minutes, and then get into Q&A for the remainder of the 20 minutes, and try and wrap by 12. So before we start, I'll request the panelists to pass your opening comments, but give your introduction as well. And then the opening comment, I would request you to talk about very briefly your experience of the lockdown and your recent experience of unlock. Maybe you start with Vaibhav.
Hey guys. So, although APD has already told you guys about me, I'm a creative person in the body of an entrepreneur, you can say. So that has actually enabled me to build a business around it over the last 20 years. And I run a company called Victor Tango Entertainment. It has two verticals. One is content production, obviously, as Arvind said, and the other vertical is activation events, wherein we specialize in school contact programs, which is a very, very specialized field, and we have a fairly clear market leader position in that space. Now, as for the lockdown, one of the key highlights for us has been that the moment, see, my product is audiovisual content. The consumption of my product went up, and there was an absolute stoppage on my assembly line the moment the lockdown was brought into effect. So we had a very weird kind of a relationship with the lockdown, where people were going crazy about their average consumption time. All the OTT platforms who are majority upsurge in downloads, upsurge in registrations, paid subscriptions, and average amount of time the consumer was spending on the platform. And at the same time, we completely had to, production came down to a grinding halt. Now, so that was lockdown for us. Thankfully, we had a pipeline of a lot of developmental work. So it's almost like I got 2 extra months to prepare for an exam, which I probably had to write anyway. So a lot of my time has been kind of utilized in leading my people to spend that extra time on development, writing, creative designing, and all that. The third very, very important aspect I would want to talk about is, just like Jaideep said, the thing is, both are businesses, be it the events and activation, or be it the production business. Unfortunately and ironically, are so dependent on at least 100 people coming together that I'm in the straight line of fire. I cannot work without a bunch of people gathering together in close proximity sometimes. So yeah, we are grappling with how we are going to work around it. We're working very, very aggressively on the proposals to figure it out with industry fees and whatnot. So yeah, that's my piece.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Let's move on to Shashank.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks, Jaideep, for setting the context. And actually, thank you to the Alumni Committee for organizing this event and a platform which gives us an opportunity to talk about the current relevant topics. And this is the hot topic, right? A quick introduction from my side. So, last 18 years since Simsr, I have been part of the procurement and supply chain area of businesses across sectors in automotive, and then briefly in consulting, and a long stint actually in the beverage company Coca-Cola, and now currently last 3 years with GSK. And typically of what procurement is about and supply chain is all about. So I have handled various categories of procurement, which is direct materials, indirect materials, services, and the recent one being marketing services, which is also built on the offshoring services model that we are looking into. So that's my brief profile: procurement and supply chain, the last 18 years. Okay, now coming back to the topic about unlock, growth mindset, back to work. I would call this as phase two, as we are preparing ourselves for phase two, which is unlock. But before we even start with phase two, I think it's important for us to understand what happened in phase one. Phase one was a time when and all organizations, be it small, big, medium, large, all organizations have actually reacted, responded, and managed the situation and tried to stay afloat. And all these companies have, I would say, reacted differently, responded differently according to the situation that was brought to them. Right, and so some have stayed afloat, some have sailed through. So some of us, I mean, last 3 months, our manufacturing plants, etc., has not yet started and beginning to start now. But then there is a learning from that phase one, which will set the tone for phase two, which is law. So in phase one, depending on how we've responded and reacted to situations, there are two key takeaways that becomes a stepping stone for phase two, which is what did we learn and what do we need to do differently are the two questions which will set the tone of my unlock. And why that is important is, what did we learn and what do we need to do differently is something like, if when the pandemic struck us as business, I could have, when I'm thrown into a deep river, I mean, I'm using this analogy, when you're thrown into a deep river, and if you already know swimming, you will just, as soon as you hit the river, and then you'll try to swim across. Some others who already have a life jacket, they'll use the life jacket and then stay afloat. And there are others who actually fall into the river, don't know swimming, they did not have these life jackets, they would take some time to come up and still manage. But then each of these three types of organizations will determine what you need to do in phase two. So for me, as a starting point for phase two and unlock, it would be, what did we learn and what do we need to do differently?
Thanks, Shashank. Amresh, your introduction and opening comments, please.
Sure. Thanks, Jaideep, and thanks, Simsr, for arranging this. This is a very good, way to reach out to all of us, and also add value in terms of imparting some amount of knowledge, thoughts, experience to all our colleagues as well as friends across different industries. So, quick introduction. I have been primarily, in the financial services IT industry for close to 25 years now, 2.5 decades. Have worked in operations and technology areas across different organizations. Currently I'm the IT manager, assistant vice president in Franklin Templeton Investments, based out of Hyderabad. I have worked in organizations like Datacons, which was a product company, again specific to the mutual fund industry, both in India as well as the Asia Pacific region, handling sales, pre-sales, project management. And prior to that, in operational areas in financial services like IIT Capital Services and others. So worked across the entire life cycle, right from sales, pre-sales to delivery and support across the financial services industry over the last 2.5 decades. Coming back to your question, Jaideep, in terms of what it was like for us in terms of lockdown. At least from an IT industry, IT sector perspective, except for the first maybe 2 or 3 days, because this came up very suddenly, it was reasonably seamless. We've all been equipped with business continuity plans, disaster recovery, all of that, work from home. So for at least for a lot of the IT folks, after the first couple of days, it was business as usual. What happened in the first couple of days was the sheer size, the sheer scale of things that happened, right? We've worked from home, but nobody has been like 99% work from home. People have been work from home probably for, 30%, 35%, right? Generally. So the first couple of days, there was obviously performance bottlenecks, education for folks who have not been consistently working from home in terms of how to use VPNs, which VPNs to use, because all users were sort of bombarding the same VPNs, right? So then obviously your VPN capacity was blown out, right? You have a certain limit on each VPN. So bringing in new VPN endpoints, how do we connect with vendor platforms that probably have security restrictions in place? How do you ensure that that is seamless for a lot of the business? So I think these were some challenges, but I think we were prepared in advance. So initial hiccups, which will happen with anything that is of this size scale, were resolved within like couple of days, and it has been fairly normal for us after that, right? Again, the experience would vary based on which industry, which sector you come from, but for us, most part, it was not as bad. I guess this was sort of phase one lockdown, and how we sort of fared in that. Phase two unlock, like Shashank and Vaibhav pointed out earlier. You have to learn from this. You will have to figure out what your options are in terms of how do you return back to work, right? But there are some key considerations that at least all companies will need to look at. Safety of employees and well-being of employees and their own unique situations, circumstances will have to be primary before people or organizations determine how to come back to work and what kind of model would they like to put in place for people to come back to work. I think these are sort of my opening thoughts, comments. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Vaibhav, Shashank, and Amresh. I think that kind of sets a good tone. So, maintaining the pace, we'll quickly move. My quick question is, everyone is talking about the fact that COVID-19 has been the biggest digital transformation agent. And having seen digital transformation across a variety of industries, a variety of geographies, one thing is very clear that India had a lot of headroom in terms of digital transformation. Um, from my perspective, the way I'm seeing this is our industry and our clients. We have clients across manufacturing to aviation to entertainment and retail and so on. The digital quotient has suddenly shot up. People that were trying to think about initiatives within the first 30, 60, 90 days, the pace of acceleration has been phenomenal. What's been your experience? And if you could talk about your industry, that will be fantastic.
I can go first if you want to. Is that okay? Hello. Yeah, so from a technology perspective, I think a lot of firms, and this is across sectors, a lot of firms have already started moving towards the digital side of things, right? So how do you engage, how do you collaborate, how do you work with different upstreams, downstreams, right, with your partners, with your suppliers, with your customers? And digital has been something that has been a buzzword, maybe not just now, but probably last 4 or 5 years. And different firms, different organizations have moved or tried to moving towards digital in different ways, and they are in that journey. Some of them maybe have reached 80%, 90%. Some of them maybe still 20%, but people are definitely moving towards digital, right? So there is a couple of things there that will need to be considered and will need to be important from that perspective. One is the whole experience, right? So what kind of experience you provide to your end client in terms of interactions, in terms of the culture of the whole thing, because digital is faceless, right? So you don't actually see somebody in person interacting with you. So be it using data insights, leveraging AI, ML, chatbots, more what you call intelligent bots in that sense, to build the entire user experience to make it extremely immersive so that the customer doesn't see a lot of difference between a human interaction versus a AI ML remote chatbot experience, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is usability, how easy it is for an end customer or an end client to use what you are providing in terms of the digital experience, right? If it is extremely convoluted, it is extremely difficult, then it becomes a challenge. So considering that, the performance aspect of it, how do you ensure that it is extremely quick and efficient and lightweight to use and also deploy across across various areas, right? So that is one. And then the fourth and final thing is security, right? So how do you ensure that any experience that you bring in, you are protecting the interests of the customer as well as your organization? It's something that is extremely important and critical, that nothing untoward happens in these interactions, and also ensure that whatever data, whatever else that you have in terms of assets, those are secure appropriately. So I think these are some things that we will have to consider, and I think different organizations are in different phases of implementing this.
Thanks, Amresh. Vaibhav, you want to go next?
Yeah. So one of the things I would want to talk about over here is inertia. What the lockdown has actually done is brought the inertia down on the possible digital transformation that was actually lying in the planks for some time, and it was latent. So to give you an example, within a few days of the lockdown, I think within the first week lockdown, there was this short film released where all the big stars like Rajni sir and Mr. Bachchan and Ranveer and all these people were sitting in their own homes, and they were looking for a pair of glasses. I think that was a good indication for at least our industry, how all of them, to pull all of them on a production would be a mammoth task in the normal course of things for us. What actually happened was they all shot in their own homes without any physical proximity to anyone, absolutely observing social distancing norms, etc. It couldn't have been possible if we hadn't run into this roadblock called the pandemic, right? That is one. Secondly, there's a lot of, at least in our industry, there's a lot of developing a creative product. I'm sure all of you've had your stints with or exposure to my community while figuring out your communication messages, your advertising, and all that. You would have realized that there's this endless discussion on what is the correct creative interpretation of a or manifestation of a message and all those kind of things. And we used to read all through our careers, oh man, for one meeting like that, I will have to travel for 2 hours and go to someone's office and then, spend the next 45 minutes in getting everyone black tea and green tea and then get into a discussion. Now, all that is kind of shaved off my actual physical time of performing that job, and more efficiently, you know. I mean, one would always talk about, hey, why can't we do a video call about that? And then people would end up saying, hey, no, let's meet in our office and stuff like that. So it's a very layman's thing that I'm saying. It doesn't really have any digital dimensions to it. That is one. The other thing, I'm not this kind of change in the attitude of people within these last 90 days, where people have started accepting that we can perform our various functions in the industry of audiovisual production without really all the time physically coming together. There's this technology that has come handy. There are creative ways also that have come handy. I go back again to the short film example that I just gave you. You can't figure out, if somebody didn't tell you that it's not been shot with all of them together, you couldn't tell, right? So yeah, I think it's a new cycle of a mini evolution which has started, which will in terms of speed, it is on steroids because we all know that the need is present. We are going to probably achieve far more in this evolution than we would have achieved in our normal course time, because other things take priority and precedence. Right now it is about survival, to be very honest.
I think you put it right. I mean, one is we are all in a mission mode right now, so probably the transformative impact is going to be far higher than had we attempted something like this in the regular course.
Yeah.
That's an interesting observation. Shashank, your thoughts?
See, I'll give you examples for the entire ecosystem. So when I talk about an entire ecosystem, you look at the front end, which is the customers, distributors. That's our front end of our ecosystem. Then you have our own internal organization, which is people, as one part of the ecosystem. And the third is your external supplier ecosystem. Right now, in each of these three parts of the ecosystem, there are digital interventions which is possible, and there are digital interventions where it has still not made inroads. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So organization, when you look at internal organization, so the quick switchover, like it was an on-off switch that happened, is people who can work from home should continue to work from home. So that was like a quick win and a quick switch over to digital. And most organizations managed it pretty well as far as this part of the ecosystem is concerned in switching over to digital. Now, but the same organization, the same people who are actually in the manufacturing side, right? When you are into operations and manufacturing, so in manufacturing you need to have those people on site. Now, and that is where work from home, at least for the in-ground operators, is obviously, technically it's not possible. So you need to have those people operate. And that is where you had so many guidelines and notifications from the government as to if you are working in these plants and manufacturing plants, you need to ensure X, Y, and Z. And what are those X, Y, and Z? To put it very simply, for example, to have all those people coming into the plant from various locations, you have these transport which the company organizes. If it's a 50-seater capacity bus, today it's around 15 or 18 people going in that bus. So it starts, so the restrictions actually start from that level. So it might look at as a very small, an exercise, which has nothing to do with digital, but these are the interventions which is being taken on ground. Now, when you are actually coming into the shop floor, so as far as the operators are concerned, there are areas where you can still maintain social distancing, you wear your masks, etc. And while that is possible, but there are certain assembly areas where you have to have 4 or 5 people. So the companies have come out with innovative means as to how you maintain, iron curtain, those dust curtains and partitions transparent enough so that you can see what the other operator is doing. I'm talking about examples from, the beverage industry and the automotive industry with whom I'm in close touch. Assembly lines of automotive plants, you need to have people around you because one workstation has multiple operators fit in different parts of a vehicle. But then these are some of those, non-digital interventions which organizations have already taken on ground. So that is on the people front. The biggest challenge I would say is in the transportation. Now, even if your plants and your manufacturing setups are working, how do you transport the stuff back to your depots and transport it back to your various distribution points or even the outlets? Availability of drivers became a huge challenge for the transport industry. I mean, we've heard of cases where people have left the vehicles and they've gone behind. So organizations have had a tough time in maintaining this business continuity, especially in the manufacturing side, when you have people requirements, people to be on, and people who cannot actually work from home. So when we talk about business back to work, so we need to actually now when you're actually segregating the two areas, what can actually happen digital, work from home wherever possible, and what can you actually do for the other on ground labor intensive or people intensive areas where you can still manage, or how much of that work can actually go digital. So I think there are organizations working in those directions as to how much of this work can be transferred to digital. That's on the manufacturing side. But then that's part of just one part of, the ecosystem. Similarly, you also have the supplier ecosystem, and then you have the distributor ecosystem. What we touched upon is only this, our internal ecosystem, when you're talking about people operating in the plant and people operating in offices. And there you have a segregation. Just imagine what we need to do about the supplier ecosystem and the front end ecosystem, about digital.
Correct. And Shashank, you're right. Getting people back together in the times when, especially for the manufacturing sector, that was worst hit because of the migrant labor population, which in my opinion could have been handled much, much better. But that's a different subject altogether. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about more about Unlock 1.0. I mean, 90 days or 80 days of lockdown, and now Unlock is also not complete. I mean, businesses are allowed to operate with 10%, some with 50%, some with a lot of restrictions. Like the whole restauranting, media, entertainment business, and Vaibhav, you know the fate of it. I mean, that's actually been the worst hit.
Yeah.
But all of this has caused a lot of anxiety in the minds of individuals, in the managers, in the business leaders. This is a black swan event. No one saw this coming. No one was prepared for this. Everyone is just like being agile and doing it. And I think by far we've done a good job. But let's focus a minute about people now. As we are all ready to bring to work, there are issues that there are maybe some members in your staff are comorbid, some are very senior, some have young kids, pregnant women, and all of that. Organizations have taken care of all of that. But how are we taking care of people's practical issues which are not mentioned on any guidelines, notifications, mental health? And Weber, we'll start with you. Your industry, and I'm kind of broadening your industry a little bit, was recently hit by one particular case, and everyone is starting to talk about mental health. Well, that particular case might be very different, but I mean, it affects everyone. So, what are your views on this?
So, first of all, I'll tell you what happened within 3 or 4 days of the lockdown. We immediately assessed the kind of people we have. So while we have, uh, you know, decade-old loyals who have stayed with us in an industry where people are actually, moving from one job to the other, people are mostly freelancers. Then there are people who are young, who are staying in the city alone, who have just, probably spent a couple of years in the business. Most of the people in our business come from creative aspirations and ambitions, and not necessarily a very specific skill or training, or after having passed, a series of tests. So now it's a very ambiguous, uncertain, insecure kind of a place. So the first thing we did was we immediately reached out to everyone and said, this lockdown was as unexpected to you as it was to us. Don't worry. While you hear about all these layoffs and all that, that the news that has been kind of trickling in, we are not laying anyone off. We are not going for any of those salary cuts that people are talking about, unless the lockdown goes into another extension, which nobody can put a handle on. So we will come back to you. It kind of proved to be a shot in the arm, and actually, I would say that over the next 20 days, because there was security, because there was this comfort, etc. We saw productivity in that time, if you know what I mean, right? People said, hey, you know what, I've been thinking of this idea, now I have time. I don't think there is anything that stops me from working on it and coming back to you and giving it to you and stuff like that. So a lot of that happened. The other thing that I want to bring out here is more specific to the unlock period. We have a lot of unorganized workforce, wage workers, and stuff like that. The industry has kind of come together to look after them. The industry bodies have tried to align with the government. We have basically tried to get out these SOPs from them, so that the protocols are followed across the board with a certain sense of uniformity. All that is happening. The mental health part is something that is on the top of our list, because people get their jobs as they go around, in our business. So as a producer, what we did was that any of the pending dues uh, for most of these freelancers, etc., were cleared out without question, without without even any consideration of, oh my God, when the next when the revenue kind of starts coming in again, etc., because we know people who are working as freelancers are really, really, they have no support system. The other thing is, like I was talking to Jaideep yesterday also, I have seen empathy kind of coming back into business. People are acknowledging that it's important to talk to each other, give support to each other, ask about each other. That in business has much more value, because in the absence of a lot of structure, corporate structure and support and human resources infrastructure, it is the best we can do. So that's what I have been feeling. And going forward, I think one of the things which I wanted to talk about today was, how, not just from a mental health point of view, but overall from a biz dev point of view, also networking has always been very, very important in all sectors, all businesses. I think we will now start inventing networking 2.0. It's probably not going to be about, hey, how's it going? Let's catch up for a coffee and see what we can do together. But maybe some other form of, maybe play Ludo and figure out how we can do business together. I don't know.
Thanks. Shashank, your views on this?
I think in organization, in larger organizations, you have the HR functions, and then you have corporate functions who actually devise plans as to what you need to do. But I'm sure Vaibhav has on-ground tasks in managing his organization, so it's fully insightful to hear from him. But then, as far as some of the larger MNCs, etc., they have these functions. But then, from my experience point of view, most of these organizations, including GSK, for example, they've been proactive. It was like a switch on into a lot of engagement sessions with the employees. It was like a regular. First thing was you had regular engagement sessions, be it team sessions or even a larger team sessions. It was like it was those engagement sessions, because the company felt that it's important to engage people in these times, right? The second thing which they did was organize various mindfulness and mental health sessions, and a lot of us actually attended those sessions, which was actually insightful. And idle mind is the devil's workshop. When you're actually at home, and if you don't have your entire 8 or 10 hours of actual work, because your entire work, people who don't have a profile which can actually work from home the same way as they used to work from office, then you still have those extra hours, right? And those extra hours, idle mind is a devil's workshop. So you get into a cocoon, and these sessions actually help bridge those empty, those blank sessions in your entire day to day. So those mindfulness sessions, mental health sessions, those were insightful and very helpful for a large number of the employees. And the best thing that I liked was they had regular everyday yoga sessions. I know initially it was it was tough as to how do I attend a yoga session online, but if you actually have a calendar invite which says yoga 45 minutes at 8 a.m. every day, you have this notification popping up on your phone that you have the session. You miss once, you miss twice, and then you realize that why don't I do it actually? And that's what I felt that this engagement with the employees at these times has actually helped a lot in these times.
Thanks, Shashank. Amresh, any views from how the IT industry is responding to this?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it is pretty similar, especially for large corporates, MNCs, as Shashank rightly pointed out. a lot of things around both the physical and mental well-being of employees. So there have been, several webinar sessions conducted around, how to keep yourself switched on for the period you're working from home, and how can you switch off, right? A lot of people, when you're working from home, there is nothing like, you're switched off, right? If you're going to office, you're coming back home, and then you probably don't log in. But in this case, that's not the case. You're sitting in front of your laptop or desktop, and you're probably on 24 hours. So there have been a lot of, coaching education provided to employees that, still segregate the amount of time you spend in front of the laptop, desktop, when you're working from home versus, quality time with your loved ones, with your family, etc. So that's something that has come in, and a lot of emphasis from senior management on an ongoing basis about doing that, right? The other aspect is, in terms of engagement, we've had so many more frequent catch-ups with senior management, a lot of calls with the CEOs, CFOs, etc., in terms of telling people and ensuring that they are aware of how the company is dealing with all of this, and what are sort of the next steps in terms of dealing with this. So all of that has been there. We've had mental health month, mental awareness month, that has come in. We obviously have a helpline with, reputed providers that allow, people to call in anonymously and ask any kind of questions that they would want to ensure that, their mental health is being taken care of. People from a, because of work from home perspective, are obviously some ways missing the social team bonding, environment that you have when you are in office, right? So that's something that is missing. So we've had, individual managers and HR have had, virtual meetings, virtual fun sessions, games that have allowed employees to still feel that they are part of the team, working together closely. And we've had dedicated sessions for 45 minutes, 1 hour, where we just play some games, social gatherings, or after evening, quick get together for tea, coffee, etc. So these are some ways in which, both on our side in our company, as well as I think across the industry, people have tried to keep up and ensure that, their teams are engaged both from a physical and social and mental aspect.
Thanks, Amresh. Vaibhav, I know you have a hard stop at 11:45. We have a couple of minutes to spare, and we are also entering the Q&A zone. Quick closing comments, but if you could focus on what's the way forward for your industry, that would be great.
Correct. So, like I said, we need to first of all, something that I actually saw at a community level while working with an NGO called Yuva. What I actually learned was uh, to identify problems and then to be ready with preemptive solutions. It's very, very necessary that they need, in a group of people, in a team or in an organization, it's very important to have some appointed guardians, So
Vaibhav, we can't hear you.
it's important for organizations to basis some skill sets and some level of leadership skills and some other capabilities, appoint a group of people who can focus on preemptive solutions across the board, which includes health and safety related protocols, which include business issues, which include hazards that can come up, and having an emergency plan. Like I know of a building complex which essentially procured uh, emergency medical services uh, ahead of any of the cases coming through, and you know we all know what the dearths that we are facing in terms of ambulances and in terms of medical facilities, etc. Uh, Similarly, there needs to be a chain of command exactly how we have in terms of our business processes. So there's some level of re-engineering that needs to happen. Uh, a lot of people on ground and a lot of situations on ground. Uh, all the businesses that face consumer also need to have the same thing. So laying out of guidelines is very, very important by a few people who are appointed with certain sense of specialization. The other thing I wanted to talk about was also the importance of industry bodies. You know, we sometimes don't even connect to the industry with the industry bodies. But I have realized and experienced it firsthand that industry bodies have been a very good source of information about how things are going to be in terms of the processes being redefined, in terms of policies, in terms of industry specific guidelines, etc. So that is something I would urge everyone to engage with on a very, very lean forward kind of a you know very lean forward approach.
All right, Vaibhav, thank you so much. We'll let you go on time. It's 11:45. Thank you for joining us. If there are any questions for you, we'll send it to you offline.
Absolutely, I'm happy to report. Thanks. Bye, Amresh. Bye, Shashank. Bye, Jaideep. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, Shashank and Amresh, we'll hold on to your closing comments. Let's go into the Q&A mode. Arvind, you want to shoot questions?
Sure, Jaideep. Very interesting discussions, and we have some interesting questions coming in as well. I see a lot of anxiety with the youngsters, especially with the questions that I'm going through on the chat. So the first question that we have here is from Ashrit, which Saurav has also kind of asked the same question. How do you think the jobs will be affected, particularly for MBA students? How will be expecting campus placements in a couple of months? Jaideep, I guess you're also free to come in for the answers. Would be great to have your insights as well.
No, and guys, I'm sure with so much of social media floating around, by now you would have received messages about how the graduation batches of the year 2000 and then the year 2009 have handled the situation. This is not the end of the world. All you need to do is make sure that if you have an offer, take it. If you don't have an offer, use the time to up your skills, stay engaged, improve your networking. I received a LinkedIn message request and saying, let me know if there's a job for me. And don't be so crass. Please network with people, talk about your skills, express your ability to pick up an assignment, if not a full-time job. This too shall pass. It's a matter of time when businesses find their feet back again, and you'll get in. And if you have the entrepreneurial ability, go ahead, start something new, experiment for a year or two, and see how the market responds. You may not end up in a job at all. You may end up giving jobs to people.
Amresh and Shashank, any thoughts on this?
No, I think great thought, Jaideep. I definitely agree. I mean, it's going to be tough times. It's not going to be obviously easy, but then every crisis has taught us something new, right? So after every crisis, the kind of upskill that you see is a lot more. So there is an opportunity. Ensure, like Jaideep mentioned, ensure that you take care of first your well-being. You are first healthy and mentally in good shape if anything comes up. The other thing is ensure that you continuously skill yourself. So it is not just a one-time thing based on situations that happen. I think today's economy and today's world, you need to continuously upskill yourself. So there will be different types of things that will come up in the next few years. What are the kind of industry trends that you see? What are the kind of things that are coming up in terms of jobs, skill sets? Start preparing yourself for those kind of things. And in terms of placements, like Jaideep mentioned, if there is an existing offer that you have, obviously grab onto it. Ensure that you gain the relevant experience, exposure, network. Ensure that you reach out. Be agile, be adaptable to anything that comes up. I think these are some of my thoughts.
Shashank?
Yes, I mean, yeah, same here. I think I'll just like to add that a lot of the companies have also continued with the summer trainees, right? And it was at the peak of the crisis. You continued with projects, and in fact there were projects went on just like business as usual. And I have seen a couple of these projects. If you actually look at the report, you will not find that there has been any change. So as far as placements are concerned, that it's going to be a tough time for sure. But then I think we also need to see that there are a lot of new opportunities that might also come along because of the crisis. A lot of work that is being done on digital, a lot of work on work from home, etc. So there are opportunities that can create some new jobs. So I think we should keep ourselves aware of what is happening in the industry, so that you can latch on to some of those new opportunities which require certain new skills. So it's not about sticking on to what you have, expertise on. We also need to be aware of what is happening around us and what has changed the industry, so that you can latch on to that particular job whenever it comes along.
Thanks, Shashank. I believe we have some solid takeaways for the batch of 2020 and 21, which is graduating next year. Moving on, the next question is from Vaibhav Mohan asking, since now we are moving to Unlock 2.0, what is the major challenges for FMCG or e-commerce industry? Is it a supply chain problem, or do you think the consumer demand also has gone low?
So the FMCG industry is obviously starting to see a revival as Unlock 1.0 came into being. Supply chains have resumed. In fact, Shashank and I, we were chatting about pre-COVID. A few weeks back, we had a session about how drones will help with the last mile delivery and help with the contactless society. So FMCG will see a lot more technology advancement, contactless and all of that. But there is a latent demand in the economy which cannot be capped. I mean, within days of Unlock, you saw the Amazon deliveries spike up. That means people were just waiting for it to open. So that is one industry that will come back. In fact, my view is that, associated with FMCG, the packaged goods industry is going to go out of the roof now. Because the perception of hygiene and untouched food and all of that with the packaged food is far higher than the loose products that we buy.
Shashank, would you like to add something to this?
I think the consumer preferences, no doubt, will change. A lot of, what I'm seeing is that people are moving from the small packages to actually now the big packages, because a lot of at-home consumption has gone up. So when you were on the go consumption, you were actually looking at small packages. Now, when you're moving more into at-home consumption, then you're preferring, what in Coke we used to call it as fridge pack or home pack. And similarly, even for packaged foods, you have small packs and the large packs. So there is the preferences for packaging also has changed, because you're moving towards more of large packs. So that's one. But then that is one part. I think the other question was also about, is there a big challenge on the supply chain? And I would say it is. In fact, to service this demand that would come from the market, the back-end supply chain will be under immense, pressure, because to run your factories in various locations, all your raw materials, packaging materials, all your direct materials today are sourced from across the country. And in a lot of cases, it is also sourced from outside India, especially talking about, capital investments. A lot of capital equipment actually comes from China. So this is actually the time for the entire supply chain network to actually reset their entire supply chain system, so that you can service the demand that will come from the markets. Without any business disruption, so to say. So yes, there would be a lot of challenges, and there would be a lot of expectation from the supply chain team to look into business continuity.
Sure. Thanks, Shashank. The next question goes on to Amresh and Jaideep. Meera has asked, now more than ever, technology is playing a major role in every organization. How will AI factor in to make more difference?
So
sure.
I can tell you. Sorry, Amresh, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I think, AI has been something that has been, been looked at for some time, but the advancement in AI is still in its nascent stages, and it is still expensive for average usage across all industries, right? So it will evolve. I'm not saying it has not evolved. It had gone from 0 to a scale of maybe 3, 4, but it has not reached its full potential. So that's still work in progress. A lot of companies have, included AI or RP in that sense, in terms of looking at data and how we can gain insightful insights into that data and make decisions based on that, right? So definitely it is something that will come up. as advancements are made in your devices, in your processing capabilities, in terms of ensuring that you're able to connect all of these things together and make sense of that, out of that, and also build context around that. So all of that ecosystem has to still come together in order to make sure that you're able to leverage AI to its full capability, right? Unless all of that ecosystem is working optimally, AI will only be able to give you, very basic insights. It won't be able to make, give you a complete picture. So I think that's one challenge that a lot of companies are grappling with, but it is something that is going to, come back and, make life a lot more easier, and allow customers or even your, IT folks interact with your, entire upstream, downstream in a completely different way. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for us to make, complete leverage of that.
Jaideep,
Right. So, I mean, there will be a whole new range of AI use cases that will emerge. Last evening, I saw a video that was circulated by a research institute in Japan that is using AI to actually determine the spread of coronavirus through the droplets. Apparently, there are large droplets that come out when we speak to micro droplets. And I mean, if we didn't have this AI technology, this research would not have been possible. Apparently, the super micro droplets kind of stay afloat even for hours. And all we thought was that by avoiding surface touch and all of that, we're going to prevent coronavirus. I mean, last evening's discovery is like a big one. And mind you, all of this development happened in the last 90 days. So, Amresh, what you're saying is right. The acceleration of AI use cases is going to go up. People will want to see AI in terms of productivity. I mean, are you sitting on the Zoom meeting trying to work on your second device, or are you actually paying attention? I mean, all of those use case and applications will come up. So, sky's the limit, but AI will definitely be pervasive and the use cases will go up.
Thanks, Jaideep. Also, thank you, Jaideep, because you have been answering a lot of questions on the chat as well. So that's keeping the audience engaged that way. So moving on to the next question from Amit Kumar. Technology is now no longer an option since the industry has grown a lot over the past few years. Will the cybersecurity industry also see a huge growth?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, you could look at newspapers and news that has come out over the last 3 months. The number of cyber attacks, the number of phishing emails, the number of frauds that have happened have seen a tremendous amount of spike. We in our industry, in our company, we have seen a lot of attacks coming in. So obviously, we have kept ourselves protected by ensuring that you keep all of your infrastructure secured, right? So put appropriate firewalls, put appropriate technology, administration controls in place, etc. But you can do only so much with respect to cyber attacks and cyber security in terms of infrastructure, in terms of firewalls, software, etc. There are a lot of other things, right? So the biggest risk is people, right? So people could be your biggest strength. It could also be your weakest link. So somebody inadvertently clicks on something and that causes some malware to be downloaded or causes a security breach, or somebody uploads some data somewhere that causes a security breach. All these are education that you still have to continue to do to ensure that from a people perspective, everybody is aware of the kinds of things you have to take care of. So that's something, continuous education, continuous engagement of audiences with what are the kind of things, what are the kind of actors that will come in and try to sort of attack you or your firm, and how do you prevent that is one aspect, and the other aspect is all of the infrastructure side of it. So I think, but there is definitely going to be an uplift in terms of the use case of information security as well, as we move towards using technology more across different industries.
Thanks, I guess last 2 or 3 questions and then we should be done. The next question is from Avanti, and this is a question that even I had in my mind. Since operations that were not tech-enabled before now are, why will companies still opt for in-office presence of employees? So probably this comes from where TCS has said that 75-25 formula. So what is your take on that?
Shashank, you want to talk about it, and then maybe we could
Can
So
you
just
I'm trying to go through the question. What was it exactly? I missed the last part.
Uh, so it says that will companies still say that in-office presence of the employees will be needed?
Okay, I get it. Yeah. So I think it will be. It's not going to be a quick, immediate reaction. So I think if companies actually do that, it will actually be a reaction. It will actually be mixed. I would say it would be mixed in the sense you look at your cost of shifting to at home, because even at home doesn't come free, right? You need to make IT infrastructure available, and IT infrastructure doesn't always mean a laptop. You need to make the network available. You also need to make the basic admin stuff available even at home. So you'll have to see the rental cost of your office, your per seat cost in office, versus how much you would still need in office, right? It can't be zero. So you might still need X number of seats still in office, while you can move partial to at home. But then I think that's a model which companies will have to mix and match and see and evaluate as to how much you still need and how much you don't need. But it's not going to be yes we move 100% or no we don't move 100%. It will be, I would say, the way I would assess it, I would evaluate as to how much I need, and for me it would actually work as a mixed solution.
and you're right. I mean, Shashank, one of the things that I mean we all don't understand very clearly until it hits us is that India was never ready for work from home. I mean, the Indian household is not engineered for work from home.
Yeah.
We don't have, not necessarily, I mean, we don't have dedicated home office. We don't have a situation where there are no interruptions. I mean, right from the dogs barking in the background to the dozen doorbells, and I mean, it's not designed for work from home, and we can't ask everyone in the workforce to dedicate a space in their room, in their house, which is going to be noise free and so on. So there will be this one big issue. Also, the trust deficit in the Indian work culture. There are organizations that have a place a lot of trust, and there are organizations who don't place a lot of trust. Until that equation is fixed, the perception will be that oh, ये घर पे बैठ के कुछ नहीं कर रहा है, is probably just watching movies on Netflix and pretending to be busy. So these are two macro factors that have to be addressed before we start looking at opportunities where you can hire in any city, irrespective of where your head office is or your branch office is. So it will take some time, but certainly it has opened up minds of people to this possibility. Is it going to be an overnight change? No, it will be a transitionary approach.
I think I broadly agree, but I think, I mean, with the new normal now, people are still willing to adapt to the fact that, I mean, with US colleagues, you have their dogs barking anyways. So it is not something new. So people have now brought dogs on to the conference calls. I mean, they're actually sharing pictures and ensuring that their family or even their dogs or cats are with them on conference calls. So that's something that we have done. We've actually did an intranet article where we posted everybody's dogs and cats on video conference calls as well. So it is the new normal. But I agree. I think this is while the current situation. But if the situation goes back to something that is normal, would there be people who are willing to go back and ensure that you have dedicated office space and you don't hear a lot of background noise, people are not deviated from what they are doing? That is one. The other aspect is governance, right? So how do you ensure that from a governance perspective, an employee is working from home? There are various HR rules and regulations, right? There are various government rules and regulations with respect to work from office versus work from home. That also needs to factor in, right? So I saw a recent article where NASSCOM is trying to negotiate and work with the government in terms of making work from home something that can be done seamlessly. So these are all things that still need to be put in place before everybody starts transitioning back to completely working from home, right? So these are some things that will need to be considered. So it will evolve over a period of time.
No, I think yeah, I think this is an interesting question, but yeah, the only thing is we have to see. You have work from home for the wife. You'll have work from home for the husband. There is work from home even for the child. And if you have two children, then they are also working from home. You have, my son is in his online classes dedicated, the entire first half. So we also have to understand, you just can't take a decision, work from home from tomorrow. You also have to look at the infrastructure at home. Technically, if there are 4 members in the family and 4 people are working from home, including children, do you have that much of independent space for each of those 4 people? So I think somewhere that's the reason why I think it should be best is wait and watch and then see and transition gradually as to how much you can move and how much you can't move.
Sure.
Let's wrap with closing comments unless you have one last question.
I guess we are good to go because you have mostly answered all the questions on that as well. So yeah, we can wrap it.
Got it. So, yes, thank you so much. I mean, one of the things from our perspective, I'll tell you, is the getting back to work has not been easy for businesses. Given the space that we are in, I can give you one example. We track over 4,000 laws and changes in those laws across not just India, but several other countries. But let's just talk about India for a minute. Pre-COVID-19, we used to get about 200 notifications across these 4,000 laws that used to change minor to major changes, and these businesses would kind of take these changes and change their compliances. That spiked to 500 a month during COVID-19. I mean, that is an enormous shift. In the last 90 days, there have been more than 1,500 notifications across state, center, local, district level, plus judgments and industry notification that has caused a lot of uncertainty in terms of interpretation and which to apply, what not to apply for businesses. So businesses are asking for a lot of help in terms of, okay, there are central laws, there are state laws, there are district level laws that have come out in terms of how to reopen your work, and there are industry guidelines as well. So deciphering that is one big challenge, and we've just been in Unlock 1.0 for 10, 15 days now. But as we get into Unlock 2.0, 3.0, all of this is only going to accelerate. So my advice out there would be for businesses to keep an watch on what are the rules and regulations that you have to adhere to, because some of them might carry some action against the business. May not be a course of action, but the businesses may need to then end up spending time justifying why what they did. So just be watchful of that.
So I think sorry, go ahead, Shashank.
Okay, my point, I'll just wrap it up in 2 quick observations and what we need to do next. So one, I think we need to be aware of what the government is doing, because some of the actions, a lot of the demand that will actually come will be from a lot of help that government policies and packages that are announced. And I'll give you a very simple example. So today the question is, how do I get my demand back? Going back to work, Unlock 1 is all about how do I generate demand so that I can get back to my recover my revenues, right? That's one key business objective for all organizations today, and therefore this will not happen alone. We will need a lot of support from the government, and especially the government policies and packages that they announce. Observation of the government packages is also important because that will help us trigger where the demand will come from. And I'll give you a very simple example. A recent, I heard, just 2 days back, I heard the Daimler MD and CEO saying that the government policies will probably help them generate the demand for the commercial vehicles. And he spoke about 2 policies or the 2 announcements which government made. One, that they had opened up the mining sector and then privatization of some of the mining sectors, and therefore a lot of mining activity will happen. Also on the agri reforms that were recently announced. So these were just one piece of news, and the other piece of news was liquidity policy by which the real estate and the construction sector will free up cash for further activity. Now these 2 might just look at news, but then think from the point of view of business. These policies will actually generate demand for the commercial vehicles, mining, agri, real estate, construction. All these sectors, if there is activity or economic activity around these areas, because of the policies, it will generate demand for new commercial vehicles, and therefore there is an opportunity for demand. The rest, whatever you need to do from an organization point of view, that continues. But then we also need to be aware of what is happening from the government side and the external factors. So that is one. We need to be aware of what is happening around us. The other piece, I think I would close on by saying, and especially for my, the procurement and supply chain colleagues, I think we've all heard about data, analytics, digital, automation. I think for companies, we've all heard about data-driven marketing. I think time has now come to talk about data-driven procurement. Because when you're talking about data-driven marketing, we all know that we need to get the right campaign to the right customer through the right channel at the right time, right? We all know this. Typical marketing colleagues would know, I need to make my campaign available at the right time, right customer, and through the right channel. Data-driven procurement also needs to do something similar, which currently is happening in bits and pieces. But the next level of procurement and supply chain is about what we call it as data-driven procurement. You use data, you use analytics. Today, a lot of focus is on data, but not on the analytics front. I think that's where we now need to move with this Unlock 1.0.
Okay, thanks. So I guess from my perspective, I guess, obviously COVID was definitely an extremely disruptive event, and but all of us, all organizations have shown tremendous resilience. All people have shown tremendous resilience to continue mostly business as usual. There have been impacts, but it's still business as usual, at least in the technology world, in the IT sector. So coming to Unlock 1.0, obviously returning back to work, the key considerations will be around employee health and safety, right? So people are not just going to come back to work unless they're assured that the organization is taking all the right steps and doing all the necessary work that is required to maintain all the norms that are laid out by various regulatory bodies, government, the local authority, etc. So all that will need to be considered before you say come back to work. And people will obviously adapt a staggered approach, right? So be it what is absolutely essential for me to come back, is it something that I can manage, and within that can I do split shifts, right? Can I do something in phases, and can I do split shifts within that, so that I don't expose everybody to something in the event that it happens, and I'm also reducing my risk of ensuring that I'm able to keep my business operations as usual. So I think these are some things that will be considered before we move to back to work. The other aspect in terms of what it means for us in terms of interacting with our customers, with our supply chain, with various distributors, etc. So that will obviously undergo some changes, right? So the more transition towards digital will accelerate. The entire ecosystem of how you integrate with various third parties will accelerate. The use of cloud technologies, the use of APIs, microservices, the ability to be able to build something and deploy it rapidly. How do you change things rapidly? All this will definitely continue to grow at a rapid pace. How do you put in doing all of this? How do you put governance frameworks to ensure that any changes that you make don't break down your systems and your applications? All of that will still continue to be lay a lot of emphasis on. So I think these are some things that will need to be considered down the line, and will need to be progressed by each organization based on what maturity curve they are in at this point in time. But I think these are some things that we need to look at.
Excellent, Amresh and Shashank, and thank you to Vaibhav in absentia. Arvind and Himanshi, great job. Thank you so much for putting this together. Over to you, Arvind.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jaideep, Amresh, Shashank, and Vaibhav as well. Thank you to the attendees for attending the session. It was a great discussion. A lot of positives. We are slowly kind of getting it how the unlock will kind of unfold itself now. So yeah, let's wait and watch how things go forward. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone.